During the period 20 April to 20 May, the Communists launched 2 phases of their expected spring offensive. On 23 April, the Reds jump off on their first phase, hitting strongest above Seoul. UN troops are forced to withdraw south as British and Belgian contingents hold off the Communists in a spectacular rearguard engagement. A secondary action of this phase hits in the Hwachon Reservoir area. By 30 April, UN forces cease their withdrawal and set up the Lincoln Defense Line a few miles north of Seoul. In the central sector, UN troops withdraw south of the Pukhan River, and in the east, ROK forces pull back to Yangyang. From 1 May to 16 May, there is only minor enemy activity as the Communists build up for the second phase, and UN forces recover some ground north of Seoul. UN air forces strike at targets of opportunity. The second phase begins on 17 May with the heaviest attack in the central sector southwest of Inji and east of Chonchon. Heavy casualties are inflicted on the Reds in this area. On 20 May, the UN forces shorten their line north of Seoul, strengthen positions in the central sector, and move to plug a gap caused by the collapse of 2 ROK divisions. In the Imjin River area, soldiers of 2 combat teams quickly break camp. These combat teams are composed of British, Belgian, Filipino, and American troops. What may be the last meal for a long time is grabbed as a report is received of a large enemy force which has crossed the nearby Imjin. These UN troops start their withdrawal according to plan. Mortars blast at the approaching Reds who threaten to cut off the combat teams. The withdrawal starts south, down the main highway that passes through Wijeonbu to Seoul. Hit by an enemy shell, this UN truck tractor burns. Due to machine gun and mortar fire from infiltrated enemy troops, the convoy halts. Men take cover and wait until the way has been cleared. The long convoy moves southward again with its cargo of men and equipment. The communist offensive was expected, and nothing of use is left behind. En route, battalion commanders discuss the situation. In Wijeonbu, a sign aptly states the result of war's devastation on the town. Tanks and trucks race through the battered town to pick up units of the combat team, which are redeployed in new defense line south of Wijeonbu. Later, a battalion of infantry plods wearily through the rice paddies. After fighting off the Chinese all through the night, they slog through the pelting rain to new defensive positions. Their fatigue is apparent in every step. A little more water doesn't seem to matter much as they wade a swollen stream. Full advantage is taken of the chance for a short rest before fighting off the Reds again. Rain-soaked troops hold rearguard positions covering the withdrawal. This is the third major Red offensive of the conflict. The first was the initial North Korean aggression last June, and the second, the full-scale intervention of the Chinese Communists on 26 November. Our 155's blast evacuated Wijeonbu. Withdrawal continues as UN firepower takes a terrible toll of Chinese. Further south, nearing Seoul, the last UN vehicles cross a bridge south of Yapyong. Men of an engineer battalion pour gasoline on the bridge, which has also been mined with TNT. The bridge is destroyed. Communist human sea tactics against our superior firepower is costing them dearly for each mile they advance. At the end of the first week of the Communist spring offensive, Allied units withdraw to defensive positions north of Seoul. In the western sector, where red pressure is heaviest, trucks loaded with troops move rapidly south. UN forces have broken contact with the enemy all along most of the front. As soon as defending forces have taken positions behind the Lincoln Line, final line of defense between Uijeonbu and Seoul, engineers plant an extensive minefield. The anti-tank mines are armed as the field is completed. Anti-personnel mines will also be laid. To augment the minefields, barbed wire entanglements are constructed by the engineers. Working quickly, the wire is strung and stretched taut. A 75-millimeter recoilless rifle covers the valley which the Reds must cross to reach the Lincoln Line. Observers of an ROK division use this high point to advantage and keep close watch on the opposing hills. Artillery is called for to give relief to a UN tank column under enemy fire in the valley. HE shells blast the distant hills, giving support and cover to the withdrawing tanks. The armored patrol is returning to the Lincoln Line after contacting 2 Chinese battalions. A tank nudges a Korean hut aside to clear the field of fire for a roadblock. As Allied forces retire behind the Lincoln Line, tanks are put into use as defensive weapons. The heavy firepower of the artillery is ready. Tanks wait in emplaced positions to add their forceful punch. In the heart of Seoul, on the grounds of the Capitol building, 155 howitzers fire a sharp warning at the advancing Chinese. The artillerymen improved their emplacements within view of the Capitol. Although earlier the South Korean government warned the populace to leave, almost 500,000 remained in the city, showing confidence in our ability to hold despite the growing menace of the Red advance. The government was finally forced to order the evacuation. Only then did the people leave. The UN troops remained on the Lincoln Line to write the next chapter in the defense of Seoul. Troops of the UN forces move along a barbed wire barricade on a ridge near the town of Tokso, part of the line of defense against the communists in this sector. As further determined to the mass assaults of the Chinese, an anti-personnel minefield is planted just beyond the UN-held line. Tripwires are adjusted from the stakes to the mines, which have an effective danger radius of 75 yards. A pressure of 9 pounds against the tripwire will explode one of these lethal traps. Until the field is completely sown, each wire is marked by a lightweight plate. On the road bordering the minefield, tanks and infantrymen of a recon company survey the defense line. The next morning, the road is strewn with the bodies of 24 members of an enemy patrol which tried to infiltrate during the night. One Red soldier still lives. Men of the recon company cautiously move the wounded man onto the road from the gully. The communist is apparently in great pain, but the combat-wise soldiers, used to the tricks of a treacherous enemy, search him for concealed weapons or possible booby traps. In the shelter of one of our tanks, first aid is given to the wounded man. From a vantage point atop a hill, a machine gunner watches the valley below as his assistant adjusts his fire through a BC scope. An observer checks the terrain as a gunner fires at an enemy position in a village ahead. Smoke rises from the battered town. Troops of the United Nations maintain their vigilance and refuse to give up ground to the communist hordes without exacting a heavy toll for every foot of ground. A returning tank brings news that the infiltrating Reds have been routed from the village. Just north of Seoul, Allied planes smash Chinese columns massed for an attack a scant 1,000 yards beyond our main line of defense. Pouring down the historic invasion routes from Munsan and Uijeonbu, the Reds try to break through to Seoul. Officers observe the effectiveness of UN air power back in the skies after days of rain as it plasters enemy concentrations building up for their much-heralded May Day attack on Seoul. The planes smother the target with machine gun fire, rockets, and napalm. The infantry adds its voice. Not even the fanatical communists can stand against this sort of coordinated defense. With the full Allied power shattering their formations, the enemy's planned May Day offensive is stalled before it starts.